From invisible to inspiring, how a grieving father transformed his life after 3 years of struggle. John couldn't remember the last time he felt whole. As he twisted wrenches under the hood of a long-dead sedan, the grease under his nails was the only tangible connection he felt to something real. In the quiet streets of Maplewood, a community that thrived on familiarity, John had become a ghost, drifting through the motions of life. The weight of his wife's absence clawed at him, each day a reminder of the laughter that once rang through their home, now aching silence filled with memories of Ella and Matt, who were struggling to grow without the warmth of their mother. He barely noticed as the sun dipped below the horizon, the comforting light fading along with his resolve. At the auto shop, the customers came and went, each one exchanging pleasantries with him, yet none really seeing. He tightened bolts and filled tanks, but could only muster faint smiles in return. John gazed at the calendar, counting down the days to the rent due, the weight of financial burden pressing down like an anchor tied to his heart. Every time he caught a glimpse of Ella and Matt quietly retreating to their rooms, he felt a phantom limb ache. How could he ease their pain? Shouldn't he be the rock? But instead, he felt adrift, consumed by the depths of his own sorrow. Then there was Mr. Thompson. The old art teacher lived next door, and often found John doodling on scrap paper during the slow hours. One fateful day, he ambled over, taking a keen interest in John's sketches. "You've got a talent, you know," he said, a twinkle of hope speculating in his eyes. "Why don't you give it a shot? Take time after hours, explore what you love." With those words, John felt something shift, a flicker of a flame within the cold shell he had built around himself. As the days turned into weeks, returning from the shop each evening became a delicate push and pull. He committed hours to canvases scattered across his small garage, paint slicked across his palms in vivid bursts. Art blossomed as an escape, yet with each explosion of color, doubts mounted like the bills in his kitchen drawer. Could he dare to dream, to chase something so frivolous in the face of his responsibilities? Did an absent father pursue personal passion at the expense of his children's security? The tension surged as he wrestled with his own longing for expression and the urgent need for stability. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Then, there it was, an invitation to showcase his work, his first gallery exhibition. A swirling storm of anticipation and panic clouded his mind. People told him that he had talent, but what if no one really saw it? What if they scoffed at the raw emotion behind each brushstroke? Memories of his wife crept into his thoughts, taunting him, reminding him of who he once was before darkness enveloped him. The idea of standing in front of a crowd, clutching his fragile heart, made it race and swell with unease. As the night approached, the tension coiled tighter in his chest. He hung each painting, echoing memories and unspoken words. Would anyone glimpse the depths of grief and resilience he bled into each canvas? Just as he finished arranging the last piece, he spotted a familiar face in the crowd, the person whose opinions weighed too heavily on his heart. The air, slick with anticipation, ignited a familiar anguish, and as he stood rooted, that question echoed like thunder in his mind. Would he step into the light, or shrink back into the shadows he knew so well? The room thrummed with a low hum of conversations, yet they felt like distant echoes to John. He held his breath and scanned the crowd, hearts clattering like percussion instruments. In this moment of anticipation, he was acutely aware of his own vulnerability. This was not only a showcase of his work, it was an exposition of his grief, his yearning, and the remnants of hope he clutched tightly. As people began to drift from one painting to another, John felt an inexplicable mix of pride and dread. Each piece bore testimony to his journey, marked by brushstrokes that embodied the chaos of his emotions. But the looming dread of judgment hovered like a dark cloud over him, threatening to unleash a storm at any moment. Moments turned into a vague blur, but the familiar face in the crowd sharpened his focus. Raymond, a former colleague from the auto shop, seemed to embody all his insecurities. What would Raymond think? After all, he was still a mechanic by trade and an untrained artist, a juxtaposition that clawed at John's confidence. Would he be scorned for venturing into a world that could undermine the toughness expected from him? Suddenly, John was aware of the encroaching silence as people began to look toward him, a collective gaze that both drained and invigorated him. Adrenaline coursed through his veins. This wasn't just about the art anymore, but a definitive moment of reckoning. He cleared his throat, turning toward the crowd with an unexpected surge of clarity. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice surprisingly steady. "These paintings tell my story." He paused, knowing his words would carry weight. "In the past 3 years, I clung to grief, but I also learned to reframe it, to transform pain into something meaningful through art." As he spoke, the knots in his stomach began to ease with each sentence. Gentle murmurs rippled through the crowd, and his eyes found Mr. Thompson's encouraging nod. It dawned on John that they weren't just spectating, they were validating. He wasn't showcasing artworks made from just paint and canvas. He was sharing a piece of himself. "I lost my wife, and in that loss, my children and I struggled to find our way without her. But art became my refuge and my compass," he continued, the words pouring from a well of sincerity he'd been too afraid to access. "If I can turn my grief into something beautiful, perhaps it can echo for you too." A palpable shift coursed through the room, a ripple of understanding igniting the atmosphere. John exhaled, allowing a spark of hope to take root in the nooks of his heart. People moved closer, engaging with his work, expressing emotions he never anticipated evoking. The blank canvas, once filled with despair, transformed into a medium of connection. The looming shadow of anxiety began to peel away as he found his rhythm. But just as warmth began to bloom in his chest, he noticed Raymond at the back, arms crossed, expression inscrutable. A challenge hung in the balance, reviving old fears. Was he still just the broken mechanic? Or had he become something new? A man who could bridge the past and paint his future with resilience. As the crowd bustled, John steeled himself, preparing to confront his colleague, to respond not just to Raymond, but to a part of himself that feared judgment and rejection. The moment felt charged with possibility, a harbinger of change. The onlookers, exhilaration in their eyes, urged John forward, but would he take that step out of his comfort zone? In that pivotal moment, the question loomed larger than ever. Was he ready to forge a new identity and break free from the chains of his past? The air thickened with tension, a doorway to transformation awaiting him. The crowd's energy pulsed around him, a tide of anticipation that both exhilarated and terrified John. He could feel the weight of Raymond's scrutiny. It was an anchor pulling him down into doubt. But in the shimmering array of faces, he also recognized encouragement, unspoken yet palpable, nudging him closer to a pivotal moment. He had come so far, but the path ahead felt fragile, like a painted line on a canvas. Could he truly embrace the identity of an artist, a redefined man, when the spectre of his past still loomed? John turned his gaze toward Raymond. The mechanic's hardened expression was unreadable, yet John sensed an undercurrent of skepticism that made his heart race. "Just do it," he muttered to himself under his breath, gripping the edges of the podium as he plunged deeper into his thoughts. Beneath the layers of fear and vulnerability, determination began to kindle. This was a reckoning, and he owed it to himself. "Raymond," John called, his voice cutting through the surrounding chatter. The crowd's attention swiveled, eyes darting toward the two men. Intense silence enveloped them, amplifying the moment's significance. Raymond uncrossed his arms, but remained stoic, the hints of judgment still flickering in his gaze. John inhaled, steadying the turmoil swirling within him. "I know what you might think," he began, feeling the challenge of vulnerability sweep over him like a warm embrace. "You might see a mechanic trying to play artist, but this isn't about art being a hobby." With each word, John felt layers of himself peeling away, no longer just the grieving husband, but a man daring to embrace creativity as a legitimate expression of his struggle and healing. "This is about transformation," he continued. "It's about grief evolving into something that connects us. I lost my wife, and in my pain, I found my voice through color and canvas." The crowd shifted, the murmurs growing as they absorbed his raw honesty. Raymond's expression remained unreadable, but John noted a slight change, a flicker of something softening behind his hardened facade. "I created these pieces to show you that even from the deepest sorrow, beauty can emerge," he said, gesturing to the paintings behind him. "I stand here to tell you that we can redefine our lives, channel our experiences into something of value. And I'm not just talking about art, I'm talking about reclaiming our narratives." Scratchy silence thickened the air as he let those words sink in. John's mind raced with the consequences of his honesty. He felt exposed, but liberated, as if the act of sharing could somehow reshape the dread that had long wrapped its grip around him. "So, Raymond, I ask you, not to judge, but to see. To understand that sometimes stepping into the unknown is the first step toward healing." Raymond's gaze shifted momentarily, his arms loosening at his sides, perhaps considering the metamorphosis unfolding before him. As John spoke, he felt a visceral connection with the audience, an understanding that resonated beyond mere words. Perhaps, in this very moment, he was no longer simply conveying thoughts but igniting hope. Yet despite this surge of courage, shadows lingered at the edges of his resolve. What if Raymond's acknowledgement crumbled into scorn? Would he remain steadfast amid rejection? John forced himself to hold Raymond's eyes, a silent determination glimmering between them. The room felt electric with anticipation, and as John paused, a new wave of questions cascaded through him. Had he truly bridged the gap between his past identity and the man he aspired to be? With each heartbeat, the moment spiraled toward resolution. The path forward beckoned him. Just as clarity began to settle in, a pointed question erupted from the back of the room. "What's next for you?" John blinked, the unexpected challenge creating an exhilarating, terrifying tension. He had laid bare his heart, yet now the conundrum unfolded. Was he prepared to lay the next layer of his vision upon this still fragile canvas of life? The weight of unanswered questions loomed large, but amid the growing pulse of hope, one thing was clear. This wasn't just a showcase. It was a new beginning. The question hung in the air, solid and unyielding, as John instinctively felt the heat of its weight. "What's next for you?" Pierced through the moment he had been building toward, and suddenly all eyes were locked on him, demanding answers. He hesitated, struck by the enormity of the inquiry. "What's next?" he echoed softly, contemplating not just the question, but everything it represented. Despite his newfound courage, a brewing anxiety coiled tightly in his stomach. He realized that standing before the crowd, revealing his heart, was only half of the journey. The real challenge lay in what he would do next, how he would reinforce that newly found identity. John took a breath. "What's next is about commitment," he started slowly, feeling the tremors of uncertainty beneath his carefully chosen words. It's about taking what I've experienced and using it not just for my growth, but to inspire others who might feel lost in their grief. I want to create a space where people can share their stories through art, where we can turn pain into a canvas of hope. As he spoke, he noticed Raymond shifting slightly, brow furrowing as if wrestling with the concepts John just laid out. There was still skepticism in his eyes, but now there was also curiosity. Perhaps, John thought, what he was proposing wasn't as foolish as he had initially feared. Art had, after all, always been about connection, mixing colors and blending emotions. I want to hold workshops, collaborate with others who've experienced loss, offer them a way to express what they've gone through, to find community in shared struggles. The ideas poured from him as he built momentum, each word adding to a structure he was beginning to see in his mind, something tangible rising from the depths of his spirit. But was it enough? An inkling of doubt surfaced, whispering cruelly that he was venturing too far, that he lacked the credentials to lead such initiatives. John clenched his fists, dismissing the thought as quickly as it came. If he waited for someone else to validate his ideas, he would never embark on this journey. The very act of speaking those dreams into being felt like a pledge to himself, an oath of transformation. The audience sat there in contemplative silence, the energy in the room thicker with possibilities, yet there was still Raymond, an anchor threatening to drag him back. And what if they don't respond? He wanted to ask. Just when John felt he might buckle under the pressure of his aspirations, he glanced back at some of his pieces. Each stroke he had laid on canvas was a testament to the turmoil he had faced and conquered. Their vibrant colors spoke of resilience. If his art could evoke such feelings in others, perhaps they would listen. Art can unify, he declared, a spark igniting within him. It can heal. It can turn grief from a weight to a fire, pushing us forward instead of holding us back. I will create an exhibition that not only showcases my work, but also invites others to join in, to contribute pieces of their own journeys. The crowd stirred, responding to his passion, their murmurs shifting to applause as ripples of support began surfacing in the collective energy. Yet beneath that growing warmth was still a clenching node of anxiety. What if this was all naive? What if he laid out this vision only to fail in the execution? He could feel the familiar tug of self-doubt creeping up. Trust in the process, he reminded himself internally. Each moment would be a building block, and failure could lead to insight. He had to trust that whatever came next held the tools for learning, growing, adapting. As the applause faded and a new stillness wrapped around him, John took another deep breath, ready to cement this next step on solid footing. But then the question came again, louder this time in his mind. Was he really ready to forge ahead in this way? Will you step into this mission, even if it means facing the skeptics among us? The ultimatum echoed between his ears, demanding reflection. In that pivotal moment, amidst the affirming glances and whispers of admiration, John felt a flicker of determination ignite anew. This was not just about him anymore. It was about what he could offer the world. And as he contemplated his uncertain yet thrilling future, he felt the weight of possibility crashing over him, washing away doubt. The real challenge awaited, not the act of creation, but the courage to execute it. With resolve stretching through him, he turned back to Raymond, who remained attentive although still cautious. The moment had come for John to bridge the chasm between vulnerability and execution, to ask not only for acceptance, but also for an ally in his journey. "Raymond," he said firmly, his voice breaking through the lingering silence again, "will you join me in this vision? Together, I believe we can build something meaningful." In that query lay both an invitation and a challenge, igniting a tension that opened the door to whatever uncertainty loomed ahead. Would Raymond accept, or would he represent the very skepticism John had dared to confront? Raymond's eyebrows shot up slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. For a moment, his lips parted as if he were about to speak, but the words caught in his throat. John felt that silence, stretched like an elastic band, taut with anxiety and anticipation. It was in this suspended moment that John recognized the crossroads at which he stood, not just facing Raymond, but also his own fear of rejection. As the silence dissolved, John took a step closer, his hands still trembling slightly, betraying the calm confidence he desperately tried to portray. "I know you doubt this idea," he said, his voice unwavering. "You fear it won't resonate, or that it's unrealistic. But I've seen art heal. I've felt its power firsthand. I can't do this alone. I need someone who understands the stakes." Raymond finally broke his silence, his brow furrowed deeper with concern. "What if it doesn't work? What if you pour your heart into this and no one shows up? You could end up isolated, disappointed." John felt a familiar sting of doubt but countered it with resolve. What if it does work? What if we touch lives, give others a voice in their grief? I've lived without purpose for too long. I'm not ready to step back now. The words flowed from him with a fervor that surprised even himself. He wasn't simply fighting for validation. He was articulating a vision born from darkness. John was compelled to invest everything into this project, to transform it into something greater than his own pain. Taking a steadying breath, he pushed on. "You understand what it means to carry grief, Raymond. You've buried your own burdens. Imagine reaching out to others who feel alone in their sadness. We could create something that not only honors our journeys but resonates with countless others." Raymond's gaze softened, and the initial skepticism began to wane, albeit slowly. "It's a significant risk, John. You're asking for commitment on both our parts, not just enthusiasm." A lump formed in John's throat, but he met Raymond's gaze unflinchingly. "I'm not here to chase a fleeting goal. I want this to be a foundation. If we fail, at least we tried to give voice to others who feel they don't have one. We'll learn and adapt as we go. Isn't growth worth the discomfort?" The question lingered in the air, heavy yet inviting. John felt the weight of responsibility shift, and he noticed Raymond's posture easing, tension releasing. They had journeyed through darkness. Perhaps a shared struggle could foster a partnership capable of generating change. "But what if," Raymond began, contemplating the terrain of this endeavor, "what if your vision extracts too much from you? You could risk your own emotional stability, John." The caution in his voice was unmistakable, but John could sense a creeping curiosity beneath it. "I'm willing to face that," John replied. "Every ounce of pain I've endured has taught me invaluable lessons. I've learned about resilience, and now I want to channel that into something meaningful." The resolve in his voice marked a turning point. This wasn't merely about John anymore. It was about translating personal growth into communal healing. The air between them shifted, ambivalence giving way to a cautious alliance. Raymond took a moment, contemplating not just John's drive, but the growing potential before them. "All right," he finally said, cautiously brave. "Let's sketch out a plan. This doesn't mean I'm all in. There are too many variables to ignore. But I see your passion, and perhaps it's time to confront the doubt together." Relief washed over John, but it was laced with the sharp edge of anticipation. They were making decisions, mapping an unpredictable journey, as each minute was charged with a new potential failure or glorious victory. In the days that followed, as ideas bloomed and structured discussions unfurled, John found himself planning for the future more intricately than he ever had before. They outlined the logistics together, debating the nitty-gritty, each detail honing John's focus further. As they worked side by side, he grasped that vulnerability wasn't just about exposing his own wounds. It was also about inviting others into a shared healing. Yet beneath this exhilaration hid another layer of tension, Would he be prepared to confront the deeply ingrained self-doubt that threatened to derail him? With every breakthrough and brainstorming session, John felt the emotional heaviness of expectation settling around him again, whispering unsettling reminders of all that could go wrong. Was he truly equipped to lead others through their grief when his own shadows loomed only a heartbeat away? As John stepped away from the work table after an intense late-night session, a voice in his mind echoed a question he both dreaded and craved to confront. Would he find the strength to face his own fears in the process of helping others? The quiet was thick with unanswered uncertainties, and he could almost hear the ticking clock of impending change. Would he emerge with newfound fortitude, or would past insecurities threaten to consume him again? The weeks rolled into a blur of meetings and creative sessions, each moment dictating the tempo of John's unfolding journey. As he spent more time with Raymond, their discussions grew increasingly layered and complex. They laid foundations that shifted with each idea, but doubt still nipped at John's heels, a persistent shadow he could not shake. Sitting across from Raymond at a cafe one morning, John sensed the fissures in his resolve. While their plans began to take shape, he grappled with lingering concerns about their potential impact. He twirled the cold coffee cup in his hands, lost in thought, as Raymond outlined the necessity of marketing their project. "We have to make sure people know what we're offering," Raymond insisted. "It's not enough for us to believe in it. Others need to see the value too." John looked up, his mind racing. "You're right, but what if our message gets lost in translation? What if all we manage to do is expose our vulnerability without generating any true understanding?" Raymond cocked his head, his expression shifting from determination to understanding. "Those fears are valid, John, but we can't allow them to paralyze us. We need to be willing to test our limits, push through discomfort." John took a breath, grappling with the emotions that surged within him. It was difficult to dismiss the effort they were investing, yet he found it even harder to quell the anxiety that throttled him. The weight of their endeavor felt like an avalanche, and he was only inches away from being buried beneath it. "Think about your experiences," Raymond said, a hint of urgency creeping into his voice. "You've already helped yourself through your pain. Isn't this an even grander purpose?" Each word served as an unyielding pull towards acceptance. John's heart thudded against his ribs. He'd spent so long stacking up failures that the thought of embodying hope felt surreal. Could he struggle with his own darkness while becoming a beacon for others? As the sun crested higher, illuminating the cafe, so too did a small ember of possibility flicker within him. He had faced the dark alleyways of his grief and emerged, albeit haphazardly. This moment rang with a call to action. It was the chance to channel his heartache into something that transcended simple relief. The choice was clear, yet daunting. He took a decisive breath. It was time to immerse himself completely. "Let's create a marketing strategy that conveys not just what we are doing, but why it matters," he stated, newfound assertiveness coating his words. "We need to articulate the transformation we've experienced in order for others to step into it." Raymond raised an eyebrow, impressed. "That's the spirit. We'll tell our story authentically. That's the key. If we can convey sincerity, it will resonate." The momentum they had built together shifted gears. Conversations turned into tangible action steps. John immersed himself in the details of branding, feeling the pulse of creativity coursing through him. Yet, as he delved deeper into this world of public communication and emotional outreach, the flares of self-doubt reared up frequently, reminding him of his insecurities. Each task, while exhilarating, felt like a tightrope walk over a chasm of fear. One evening, after a long day of planning, John settled into his chair, the shadows of doubt creeping back. A familiar theme reverberated through his mind. What if he was not enough? What if his efforts crumbled under mounting pressure? The image of failure loomed ominously, taunting him in soft whispers. He closed his eyes, trying to center himself, but the echoes didn't dissipate easily. In the stillness, he questioned the core of his motivations. Why was he pursuing this? He craved acknowledgement for his own grief, yet a deeper yearning tugged at him. This connectedness, this drive to help others find their path through pain. As he stared into the darkness of his closed eyelids, the question materialized anew, a deeper, more consuming inquiry that now demanded attention. What did it truly mean to transform grief into inspiration? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but it also ignited a flicker of clarity. If he wanted to lead others, he would need to confront his own battles, not only as a guide, but as a fellow traveler through the darkness. In that moment, as he reflected on his experiences, the world outside fell silent. Would he rise to the occasion, harness the lessons from his past, and genuinely embrace his role as both the inspired and the inspiring? The answer hung just beyond reach, gnawing at his resolve and pushing him to venture deeper into self-exploration. The stakes were high, and he felt a burgeoning fear intertwining with a thrilling sense of resolve. As John ventured into this new territory, he knew one thing: the real challenge was just beginning. With each decision, the future called out with both a promise and a threat. Could he truly shape a healing experience, or would he spiral into a quagmire of self-doubt? The thought reverberated in his mind like an unrelenting drumbeat, underscoring the intensity of the journey ahead. In the following days, John's focus sharpened. He took to mapping out their marketing strategy with an intense clarity, driven by both passion and fear. The juxtaposition of excitement over the project and dread of potential failure began to transform into something more productive, an urgency to understand the very core of their mission. At the office, he would often revisit their reasons for embarking on this journey, scribbling notes fervently. What kind of message did they want to craft? How could they encapsulate the struggle and resilience inherent in their experiences? Each reflection opened up layers of his psyche that he hadn't fully confronted. Memories of grief flickered to life, faces, voices, experiences that resided deep within him. Raymond, noticing John's fervent energy, suggested they host a brainstorming session with a small group of friends and colleagues. "We need fresh perspectives to refine our message," he reasoned. It struck John as a pivotal moment. Would he allow others to see the raw, unfinished version of himself? What if they judged the messiness still existing within his mind? Yet, there was a growing sense of necessity. He craved feedback, needed to validate his ideas. That weekend, the small group convened in his apartment, each participant an essential piece of the puzzle. As they shared stories of their own struggles and successes, John felt the palpable energy shift. Vulnerability unfolded around the table. Before long, laughter filled the room, interspersed with shared tears as they connected over their collective grief. It was in that space, woven through words and emotions, that John experienced a revelation. His past and its achy lessons weren't just burdens. They were cornerstones of understanding that could reach out and touch others. What if he framed his narrative not solely as a story of overcoming grief, but as an embodiment of resilience and growth? What if this mission wasn't just about articulating pain, but rather demonstrating the transformative journey that followed? As the meeting wore on and sticky notes filled the wall with ideas, John found himself speaking with a newfound authority. He directed the group effortlessly, his insecurities momentarily overshadowed by a vision of what their message could encompass. On the surface, he was guiding the discussion, but internally he was rapidly peeling back layers of doubt. When it was time to gather the notes and send everyone off, John felt a surge of gratitude for his friends' honesty. They reflected back to him an authenticity he had often feared he lacked. It was an invigorating exchange, one that ignited deeper resolve within him. The next day, he dived into drafting the messaging strategy, overlaying his personal experiences with the insights of his friends. He felt like an architect, thoughtfully placing each word as a brick in the foundation of something significant. Yet, as the exhilaration transformed into momentum, shadows returned to creep in. Every moment of triumph was laced with the gnawing fear that his authenticity may not resonate as he hoped. What if the very essence of their project unveiled weaknesses rather than strengths? What if they failed to connect, their sincerity misunderstood? That night, seated at his desk with the glow of the laptop illuminating his face, John wrestled with these thoughts. He opened his journal, filling pages with questions and reflections. The depth of what he had unlocked began to feel daunting. Could he really own his narrative, every tear, every moment of doubt, and turn it into an inspirational beacon? But what choice did he have? He couldn't turn back now, not after peeling back the layers of his own resistance. The journey of transformation beckoned, a road that promised discovery, but also demanded courage. As he penned the final notes of the evening, the compelling question echoed: was he ready to embrace the vulnerability of revealing his authentic self to the world? The clock ticked into the early hours, and John sat still. Would the clarity of purpose that had blossomed within him be enough to combat the looming fears? The tension clung to the air, thickening his resolve while simultaneously unsettling him. A choice lay ahead, one that could either elevate his mission or shatter it. The moment of truth drifted ever closer, haunting and exhilarating in its possibility. Would he rise to the challenge or falter beneath the weight of expectation? The flickering promise within beckoned him onward, and the stakes had never felt higher. The dawn of a new day broke through John's fatigue, spilling golden light into his small apartment. He had slept fitfully, the weight of unarticulated fears pressing down on him like a heart heavy with unshed tears. As he rubbed the remnants of sleep from his eyes, he glanced at the messy pile of notes that had accumulated on his desk. They weren't just fragments of ideas. They were pieces of himself, still grappling for clarity. With each note that he touched, he felt a connection to the discussion that had taken place days prior. Ideas floated back to him, words of encouragement from his friends, lingering like echoes, reminding him of the value in vulnerability. He inhaled deeply and realized his mission was more than just a message. It was a lifeblood, a means for him to reach out to others who felt isolated by their own experiences. Today, he decided, would not be another day consumed by self-doubt. Instead, it would be a day of action. He opened his laptop and began refining the messaging strategy, embodying every ounce of courage he could muster. Each word pronounced a newfound intention. No longer would he hide behind self-imposed barriers. He would thrust his narrative into the sunlight, allowing it to blossom and breathe. However, his progress was punctuated by moments of resurgent dread. As he drafted a new paragraph, his heart raced, each heartbeat accompanied by a painful question. What if everyone dismissed his story as mere sentimentality? What if they deemed his struggles insignificant? These thoughts slithered into his mind, haunting and relentless. Yet, each time he hesitated, he recalled the warmth of the room during the brainstorming session, the validation in laughter, the sincerity in solemn nods. To allow fear to paralyze him felt like giving up on not just himself, but on those mirrors of compassion reflecting back at him. In search of reassurance, he reached out to Raymond, who listened patiently as John articulated his fears. "You're building something real, John," Raymond replied, his tone steady and grounded. Each word offered a reprieve, a kindling of fire that momentarily displaced John's anxiety. "You're not just sharing a story. You're opening a doorway for those walking similar paths. They'll see themselves in your authenticity." This notion ignited a spark within him. Could it be possible that his perceived weaknesses were in fact a bridge to connect with others? As he mulled over this thought, his fingers flew across the keyboard, drafting multiple iterations of the core message. The pulse of his heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm of ideas pouring out, each phrase chiseled away from doubt, solidified with a sense of purpose. The challenge, however, remained palpable. The weight of rejection loomed large. Each new version of the message confronted him with the reality of exposure. He would be laying bare his soul, inviting anyone within reach to scrutinize it. But within that fear was also the liberation of expression. The more he pressed into that tension, the more he found clarity emerging, shining brighter than any shadow. As the last rays of sunlight filtered through the window, John leaned back in his chair, exhausted but exhilarated. He had carved out a message both compelling and unrefined, dynamically human in its resonance. There was no more denying the reality he inhabited. It was time to step forth and share his truth. Yet just as he prepared to finalize the draft, a chilling thought struck him. He would need others to weigh in on the message, to fill the void with their perceptions. The friends who had encouraged him before could very well be the ones to sift through his raw honesty, and that meant welcoming their critique, both the praise and the potential sting of honest feedback. With a newfound tension gripping him, John hovered over the send button, knowing it could open a floodgate of opinions that might alter everything he had just worked to build. The moment felt pregnant with possibilities, each one tinged with uncertainty. Would the feedback be the lifeline that propelled him forward, or would it pull him back into the depths of self-doubt? As he clicked send, he felt an electric current rush through him, a blend of anticipation and fear. It was no longer solely about him. It was a collective thread that could bind stories and lives. He realized then, with a sharper clarity, that whether he was ready or not, the moment of truth had come. Would the validation of his friends fuel his burgeoning ambition, or would it shatter the fragile facade he had constructed? And with this final thought ringing in his mind, John awaited an answer that could reshape his journey entirely. The weight of John's decision settled on his shoulders like a dense fog. The send button had been pressed, but the response was still an echo in the cavern of his mind. He paced the apartment, a cage of thoughts interspersed with moments of breathless anticipation. Anxiety coiled tight within him, leaving little room for clarity. His phone buzzed suddenly, piercing the stillness. He glanced at the screen, half expecting a flood of notifications. Instead, only Raymond's name flickered back at him. A knot formed in his stomach as he opened the message, scanning the words that felt both familiar and foreign. Breathing through it, John. Just remember, this is your truth. Truth. The word lingered, reverberating in his mind. He had often regarded his experiences as fragments of a shattered self, but now it seemed like a powerful foundation. If truth meant laying bare the complexities of his journey, then he was learning it meant more than mere vulnerability. It was a balance of strength and fragility, simultaneously inviting connection and potential judgment. Days passed, each hour a mix of anticipation and dread. He immersed himself in drafting, revising notes, and contemplating the potential paths ahead, all the while waiting for his friend's response. In these moments, John discovered something unexpected. His narrative had become more than an expression of self. It transformed into a space where ideas about loss and recovery existed side by side. With each iteration, he acknowledged the rawness of his past, allowing reflections of his former self to weave into the present. Yet he struggled. He faced the daunting shadow of self-scrutiny. No longer could he merely rely on the affirmation of friends. He had to confront the deeper, gnawing doubt that he was enough. What if, after all this effort, his words fell flat? What if he failed again in his attempt to authentically convey his experiences? In the stillness of the afternoon, when sunlight bathed the room in a golden glow, John made a choice. He took a step back from the window of scrutiny. Instead of seeking validation, he turned inward to explore the lessons learned from grief. What had it taught him? What had he endured to emerge on this side of pain? He realized he had also become a reservoir of insight, one that encapsulated resilience. He began a new draft that focused less on the fear of judgment and more on the shared journey of healing. He sought to articulate not just the survival, but the evolution from grief into strength. He poured his heart into documenting moments of despair, but coupled them with instances of growth and hope. As John wrote, he sensed a shift within himself. Words flowed with newfound determination, and with every keystroke, he felt less like an imposter and more like a voice worthy of being heard. The challenge now was not to suppress the delicate threads of vulnerability, but to weave them into a fabric of authenticity that resonated with others' struggles. Just as he became comfortable with this narrative shift, his phone chimed again. This time, words from his friends flooded in, each brief message a blend of encouragement and constructive feedback. Heart racing, John opened the longest message from Raymond, detailing the impact his draft had on him. "I didn't just read your words, I felt them," Raymond had written. "You're not just sharing your story, you're illuminating a path for others." The validation he had sought emerged, but it brought a different challenge to light. As he read, a sense of urgency built within him. His work now lay before him, showcasing seductive potential, but also the weight of expectation. Would the very acknowledgement he sought spur an escalation in the stakes? With renewed vigor and a mind racing with possibilities, John faced his upcoming task. Each word had the strength to inspire or judge. His next steps needed both courage and foresight. Would he be able to share not just the story, but a blueprint of healing that could truly connect? The moment felt transformative, yet questions loomed. If he revealed the depths of his struggle, could he withstand the weight of external expectations? Would it be transformative, or would it risk losing the progress he had built? John prepared for the next stage of his journey, his resolve growing as he contemplated sharing the fuller truth. The time had come to decide if he could champion this narrative, not just as therapy for himself, but as a spark for others who needed it. What would it take to take that leap? And in the wake of exposure, would he still find himself whole? In the months that followed, John embarked on the culmination of his journey with a clarity that was previously obscured by self-doubt. With each workshop he held, he witnessed the power of shared experience, the palpable healing that emerged when individuals confronted collective grief through art. The once unfamiliar space of vulnerability became a thriving community where voices intertwined, resonating with understanding. He had laid the groundwork for something profound. Each session not just an outlet for expression, but a catalyst for emotional connection. Attendees left not only filled with newfound tools for navigating their grief, but invigorated by a sense of belonging. In this transformative environment, John found fulfillment. He had gone from a place of mourning to becoming a beacon of hope for others. One day, while preparing for an exhibition showcasing the work created during these workshops, John took a moment to reflect. He looked back at the old self, the man gazing hopelessly into the abyss. That man had transformed into someone recognized not only for his artistry, but as an advocate for healing through creativity. His journey echoed resilience, a testament to the profound power of embracing authenticity. The exhibition became a milestone. As people streamed in, admiring not only the artwork, but also the stories behind them, John felt a sense of solidarity, a surge of validation that had long eluded him. He stood at the front of the room, watching attendees share laughter and tears, their narratives blending into a vibrant tapestry of recovery. Among them, Raymond migrated closer, pride gleaming in his eyes. "John," Raymond said, clapping a hand on his shoulder, "you've created something magnificent here. This isn't just a gallery, it's a movement." For the first time in years, John's heart swelled with confidence. He had achieved something significant, not just for himself, but for an entire community that sought solace in shared experiences. Each brushstroke was filled with stories of sorrow intricately woven with hope. Pieces of himself he had successfully transformed into tools for others. As the night carried on, he mingled among the crowd, welcoming notes of appreciation and feedback. The conversations flowed instinctively from person to person. No longer afraid to claim his title, John spoke of grief with intention and clarity, owning his narrative like never before. He had finally embraced the wonderful paradox he had uncovered. Vulnerability breeds strength, and art transcends suffering. The culmination of the exhibition led him to a pivotal moment, a sealed invitation to a regional art showcase, highlighting local artists dedicated to community healing. The recognition felt surreal. For an artist who once doubted his merit, receiving such acclaim was a testament to his growth. It was validation, not just from onlookers, but a confirmation that he had harnessed his pain into something exquisite. As he accepted the invitation with grace, a solid confidence enveloped him. This was not merely a moment of triumph, it was a recognition of his transformed identity. John was no longer an invisible father marred by grief, but a man embracing his role as an inspiring artist, bold and intent on fostering connection through creativity. Gone was the man who dodged judgment, replaced by a figure eager to showcase the healing potential of art. As he stood before the gathering crowd at the showcase, he prepared to share words that would resonate not just as a reflection of his journey, but as a clarion call for others. In every loss there is a space for rebirth. Allow art to guide you through the labyrinth of grief, for within each stroke lies the power to illuminate. John had not only found purpose, he had conquered the shadows of doubt that once haunted him. He emerged with a profound understanding. Authentic growth lives at the intersection of vulnerability and tenacity. He was an artist, a father, and above all, a source of inspiration, ushering others toward light bathed in color and shared humanity. And as he took the stage, he knew this was not the culmination. It was just the beginning of his ongoing journey, one that had the power to resonate far beyond himself, one that he would proudly continue to share with the world. Now, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Every single click makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this compelling conclusion. Your thoughts matter. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let's spread the message of transformation.